Dear friends of Bechlomo, in this short lecture, I want to deal with the theme of oneness and mending the world in Archer Green's Neo-Hasidism. Enjoy. Green has been a teacher, a professor at the University of Pennsylvania and at Brandeis University. He was president also of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College and created a non-denominational rabbinical school at the Hebrew College. A Jewish philosophy scholar and a neo-mystical thinker, Archer Green developed a sophisticated theology in which the consciousness of oneness leads him to address issues of peace, equality, freedom, democracy, and human rights. His Neo-Hasidism goes together with social justice, with the defense of the rights of women, homosexuals, and queer people, and with hearing the voices of the oppressed. Although he defines himself as a thinker and a teacher and not as a social activist, his permanent search for wisdom has clear implications for the political and social sphere. In this short lecture, I spell out Green's mystical thought. I describe his vision on the oneness of all and on the unity in plurality. I showcase how this vision brings him to care for all, to the promotion of love energy, and to an appreciation of the evolution. For half a century, Green studied Kabbalist and Hasidic thoughts. His own theology continues this tradition, but also differs substantially from it. Green is a neo-Hasid, not the classical Hasid belonging to a particular Hasidic community. He is a not-conventional mystical soul who is interested in the renewal of a world-affirming religiosity. He looks for a spirituality that gives meaning to human existence. Like Martin Buber, much present in his works, Green wants to make Hasidism relevant for a broader circle of Jews. He continues a Jewish mystic tradition in a loving, non-naive, and critical way. He follows the footsteps of other neo-Hasidic thinkers as Hillel Zeitlin, Martin Buber, and Avraham Yoshua Heschel. He loves the mystical tradition, but is aware of disdains in some of the mystical narratives. He is selective in his reading of the mystical sources. He does not accept the distinction between Jewish souls and non-Jewish souls. He dislikes the negative talk on the goyim. He does not agree with gender hierarchy and criticizes chauvinism. He does not take the mystical tradition as it is, but reimagines it in view of self-transformation and transformation of the world. In his post-Kabbalist and post-Hasidic Jewish mysticism, he goes to the roots of Jewish mysticism in view of Tikkun Olam. In this way, he repackages and recreates Judaism, showing its relevance for the present-day world. His revival of Jewish mysticism corrects a dry, rationalistic Judaism that was remoted from life itself and that neglected emotional profundity and passionate engagement. Green's main mystical insight is the oneness of all. His non-dualism leads him to a merciful and lovely engagement in the world. Green rereads and reimagines the Hasidic thinking and universalizes it. Jews and non-Jews may profit from such a rereading. In his Neo-Hasidism, Green lends a universal outlook to the particular Jewish mystical language. Kabbalah has a complex of mystical texts and practices, and Hasidism that popularized Kabbalah provides Green with a language that depicts an inward journey leading to acts. So, for instance, a temple becomes the word that stands for inner life, and Moshe is the liberator in each one of us. Green also switches from the vertical dimension to the internal dimension, leading to care for others. His spirituality is meant to be relevant for the world, as the title of his most recent book, Judaism for the World Expressed. The book was published in 2020. In a world that exists in the One, the task is to discover the divine sparks in all and to uplift them to their divine source. Green is an accomplished scholar in Kabbalah and Hasidism. He lives for the moment in Abu Tor in Yerushalayim. But he is foremost interested in a creative reinterpretation of this tradition. A rabbi and educator, he brings his personal questions and quest to the texts. His personal religious experience colors the ancient mystic symbolism. He studies Jewish mystical writings not in a neutral, detached way. He is involved in what is written, hearing the living voice through the words. A seeker of spiritual life, he is in a permanent spiritual quest. His research is also search. He even confesses that Martin Buber, Avraham Yoshua Heschel, Zalman Schachter Shalomi, and mostly Hillel Zeitlin saved Judaism for him. He strives to live and formulate a neo-Hasidic Judaism for himself, for spiritually serious Jews, and for contemporary seekers. Green deems that scholarship is not enough. Study and engagement, for instance, for the release of Jews from the Soviet Union, belong together. He has a decennia-long involvement in the training of rabbis. He loves personal study and complains that in the academy, the tree of knowledge is cut off from the tree of life. He contests the bifurcation between wisdom and knowledge at the universities. He is in search of wisdom, which in his view is unfortunately not the first priority of the academy. He is interested in transformation and responds to the voice that comes out from texts that become alive. As a theologian, he gives attention to the religious experience and its transformating power. His study of Jewish mysticism leads him to activity in society. Spirituality for him is pnimiut. Yet, this movement to the innermost self is discovered as ultimately transpersonal. Inwardness starts in the self and links the self to other selves. In the tales of Rabbi Nachman of Braslav, Green finds inspiration for his own journey and search for healing. One of these tales of Rabbi Nachman describes beautifully how human beings cry and long for oneness, for God, for an undivided heart. We are far from the Garden of Eden, but we yearn and long for healing of the broken heart. Here comes the story. There is a mountain, and on that mountain there stands a rock. A spring gushes forth from that rock. Now, everything in the world has a heart, and the world as a whole has a heart. The heart of the world is a complete form with face, hands, and feet. But even the toenail of that heart of the world is more heart-like than any other heart. The mountain and the spring stand at one end of the world, and the heart is at the other end. The heart stands facing the spring, longing and yearning to draw near to it. It is filled with wild yearning and constantly cries out in its desire to approach the spring. The spring, too, longs for the heart. The heart suffers from two weaknesses. The sun pursues it terribly, burning it because it wants to approach the spring. The second weakness is that of the longing, an outcry itself, the great desire to reach the spring. The heart ever stands facing the spring, crying out in longing to draw near. When the heart needs to rest a bit or catch its breath, a great bird comes over it and spreads forth its wings to shield the heart from the sun. But even at its times of rest, the heart looks toward the spring in longing. Now, if the heart is filled with so great a desire to draw near to the spring, why does it not simply do so? Because as soon as it starts to move toward the mountaintop where the spring stands would disappear from view, and the life of the heart flows from seeing the spring. If it were to allow the spring to vanish from its sight, it would die. If that heart were to die, God forbid, the entire world would be destroyed. The heart is the life of all things. How could the world exist without a heart? For this reason, the heart can never approach the spring, but ever stands opposite it and looks at it in longing. This is the story of Rabbi Nachman. A deeply religious soul nurtured by the Jewish esoteric tradition, Green comments that we are all yearning to see God's face and to enjoy His presence. We all want to drink from the divine well, but the gates of the Garden of Eden are closed. However, from the moment we become conscious that we are far from the life-giving spring, we become aware of the fact that we are close to it. The human alienation is overcome, and the healing power of those who spread love and show mercy. In Rabbi Nachman's story, Green appreciates the longing of the heart of the world for the source. We long to be healed and to be whole again. This healing is done in Tikkun Olam. Yet, Green himself develops an alternative way of speaking about God. In his radical theology, nature, God, and the evolution of mankind are intimately linked. Green's search for wisdom leads him to a deep inner reality, which manifests itself as the unity of all. In his personal interpretation of Hasidism, he calls for the unity of all within the oneness. In his unity vision, the other human being is no other, since I am part of the whole. This vision lies at the root of a humanist care for all. Good care for others expresses the love for God. Others are our fellow limbs on the single Adamic body or tree of life. Green finds in the daily prayer Shema Yisrael a reminder of the unity which commands the creation of unity, Be'avta. In love and care, we testify to the one beyond naming. In care for the other, we reassert to one. Green calls himself a mystical and panentheistic theologian. He quotes the Zoharic expression, Le tatar panui mine. There is no place devoid of God. The one underlies everything. Transcendence is present within immanence. Green is fascinated by God's glory manifest in everything, and he goes from monotheism to monism. In his theology, the non-dualistic oneness is the unity of all being in God. In moral behavior, you bear witness to the one who dwells in all. God is world-fitting and world-transcending. A religious person is the one who perceives the holiness of life and who testifies thereby that being, or Yud He Vav He, underlies and unifies all that is. In Green's non-dualistic Jewish spirituality, God dwells in us, inspires the Moshe in us to rebel against every Pharaoh and to strive for the liberation of all. God is not the Deus ex machina, but the one manifest everywhere and discovered in sparks of the human being. Yud He Vav He and being, He, Vav, Yud He, are one, two sides of the same reality. The physical and spiritual go together. The world is within the Shekhinah, but God is also beyond. Hu mekomo shel olam ve'ein olamo mekomo. It's the Bereshit Rabbah. Jewish life is dedicated to the unification of male and female within God. L'shem yichud kodesh habrichu u'shchitei. Close to Rabbi Nachman, but different from the Hasidic master who personalized the divine, Green imagines God as loving energy. God is a mysterious, transcendent entity in every human being. Transcendence dwells within immanence. Its full presence is ungraspable and ineffable. There is only one, undifferentiated whole. Through Tzimtzum, we see ourselves as separated, but ultimately, there is only one, and we are all one. The great Hasidic masters joyously served God and knew that there are several ways to be in service of the one. Green has his own way. As Frank Sinatra says, I did it my way. In accordance with the utterance of Rabbi Susha of Amipel, who said, when I die and go to the world to come, they will not ask me, Susha, why were you not Moshe Rabbeinu? They will ask me, Susha, why were you not Susha? Green proposes to think about God not in terms of higher and lower, but in terms of inward and outward. Instead of a God as a supreme being on the top of a Sinaitic mountain, we may discover the deepest reality as well, that as a well that flows freely. God is not the holy other of Rudolf Otto. Inheriting the sense of wonder of his teacher Heschel, Green repeatedly says with the Bible, Meloch kol haaretz kevodo. And with the Zohar, God is unutterable. There is no place devoid of him. God is approached as memale kol almin, usovev kol amin. That's in the Zohar. In Ezekiel's vision, in which the prophet sees God as an image like that of a human, Green finds support for this daring interpretation that puts the divine and the human together. Nevertheless, saving transcendence, he emphasizes that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Humans are not the organs of God, but they are his or her or its garment. The many reactions to Green's radical unitive theology illustrate how Green's theology aroused a lot of interest among Jews who want to deepen their spiritual life. With his mystical theology, Green takes seriously Rabbi Ishmael's saying that Torah speaks in human language and offers his own unique original interpretation of the ancient Jewish wisdom. As a consequence of his monist worldview, Green develops a religious humanism. Mysticism and humanism complement each other. He deems that God has an image, and it is the human being. Being created in the divine image means that there is something divine in the human. The human being creates the image of God in herself. Since every person is in the divine image, Green stands up for the uniqueness and equality of all. If all human beings are created in God's image, one has to come up for equal rights for all, for rights of women and of sexual and other minorities. Green's resistance and social activity stems from his belief in each person as in God's image. Values of democracy and equality are part of his worldview, since all are in the divine image. With his belief in evolution and of the uniqueness and dignity of each human being, he welcomes those who were once rejected. Green reshapes Judaism as a religion that promotes quest and a vision of life. The Jewish mystical literature with symbolical language and imagination helps him in the reconstruction of Judaism. His Judaism is not a Judaism of fear, nor a mere set of rules. It rather bears a message of love, compassion, and healing. It is self-transforming because of the primordial question, Ayeka, to which one responds in mending the world. Avodah consists in self-transformation and looking for the divine sparks in everybody and everything. Greek Judaism is foremost a counterculture to stand up against the mighty, as Jeremiah, Yeshaya Leibovich, and the writers Amos Oz and David Grossman. In traditional Judaism, the divine commandments occupy a central place. For Green, too, outer deeds are important, but they are means and not ends. They are vessels to contain the divine light that floods the soul. Mitzvah is linked to the Aramaic Savta. God and the human being are together. One is called to serve the holy, Anna Avda Kuchabrihu, by respecting the holiness of all life. Love of God is witnessed in the love of all creatures. Green loves the Jewish tradition, but he does not think in strictly legal categories. In Boston, he created a trans-denominational pluralistic rabbinical school. His entire work consists in translating the tradition in a viable Jewish spirituality for today. He envisages a revival of halakha that is non-coercive and inclusive, embracing a plurality of approaches. Such a halakha is a path that we are not yet ready to define. He does not think primarily in today's halakhic categories and deems that the practice depends upon the individual. Judaism is for him not a legal system that one must observe. In his very first publication, Green writes that mitzvot and halakha are not interchangeable terms. The Tariq mitzvot, corresponding to the 248 limbs and 365 veins in the human being, are knowable before Sinai, whereas halakha is already institutionalization, which was necessary given the weakness of the human being. Mitzvot are spiritual needs of the individual and not a command of an external God. Already as a third-year student at the Jewish Theological Seminar of America, Green conceives religion as based on unity in which within and without are not distinguished. For Green, halakha is a way to walk through the world, a path and a discipline that one may choose. He emphasizes that all Jews are heirs of the Jewish tradition, not only the Orthodox. Green has a welcoming attitude towards people who are close to Judaism or who come to Judaism and want to creatively live out the Jewish tradition. At the same time, he widens the meaning of Israel, as does Emmanuel Levinas. Israel stands for humanity in a radical way by reimagining Judaism and translating the particular Jewish language in a universal language. He calls for a new religious awareness. He universalizes Israel, which becomes every community of righteous people that testify to the one in engagement for others. Israel for Green is a spiritual reality started by Jews, but not restricted to them. I think I come to the conclusion, if not, this lecture becomes too long. Green celebrates diversity and the unity of all. As a result of his promotion of a diversity of lifestyles, he perceives truths beyond all religions. This insight contributes to a dialogical theology. He opposes exclusivism and superiority. He lives his Judaism profoundly in great openness to the plural manifestation of religious experiences. He develops a transdifferent view in his pluralist theology. Against exclusivism, he quotes from the sayings of the fathers, "Who is wise? Miukacham? Lo make me call Adam." It's not written from every Jew, but from every person I can learn. More generally, Green believes in the underlying unity of all, not the struggle and survival of the fittest. There is a common source for all that exists. The one wants the many. We worship the one manifest in all the many traditions of humanity, says Arthur Green. Green's theology is characterized rightly as a theology of a religious seeker and a religious humanist, whose theology is a mystical and monistic panentheism. Green is indeed a seeker who pursues God's presence in answer to the call, "Seek his face always." He also takes his personal search for spirituality serious. God for him is not outside, a supreme being that governs history. Green believes in the oneness of all, and this leads him to active involvement in the world, which he greatly loves. In his creative reinterpretation of Hasidism, he invites people to follow the footsteps of Abraham as the classical Jewish seeker and to continue the journey which is still unfinished. Open to the values of our world, he formulates and lives a non-conventional, seeker-friendly Judaism that impacts on the world and is impacted by the world. The particularity of such Judaism lies in its universality. In a time that we witness religious fundamentalism and the politicization of religion, Green heterodox radical theology is an invitation to discover again loving religious energy that enlightens our world. Through his non-theistic approach of God as the inner force of existence itself, Green testifies to that force in his loving care for all human beings and his engagement for our environment. With his radical idea that there is no being other than God, he values that each person is truly God's image, and that nature, with its earth, air, and water, is holy. Since transcendence dwells in immanence, since the one underlies the many, he fully appreciates the evolutionary process which made possible the life that we live. The evolving life energy, the dynamis, is for Green the self-manifestation of the one being. It is not a violent struggle, as in Darwin, but a meaningful process. Much as Brahman in Hinduism, the one garbs itself in multiplicity. This harmonic vision of all that is, born in wonder, does not resemble Darwin's struggle for life. It allows for our participation in an endless, meaningful process. Care for our natural home and interconnectedness with other human beings contribute to the positive development of that process that is the development of being itself. As in process theology, divinity is in a state of becoming. The divine is a process without end, and we are responsible for the self-articulation and self-fulfillment of the one. In the process of the free, unfolding, and unnameable one, we are paradoxically commanded to be free and to free others. In Green spirituality, human beings are not determined by fate and condemned to live a meaningless life. In treating others in justice and love, and in saving and maintaining our environment, we testify to the one and its miraculous evolution.